Morning, students. My name's Sam Lemnios. I'm the assistant archivist here at the Naval Academy, and I'm a graduate student pursuing my PhD at Liberty University. And in this video, I'm going to be briefly going over the Naval Academy Chapel, which is the oldest chapel on the yard. And we're going to go inside and check out some of the historical objects inside. And then we're going to go back to the school's archives in the library and talk about different resources that we can access to gain more historical insight into the chapel and the various historical objects inside. So thank you for joining me. The Naval Academy Chapel's cornerstone was laid in 1904. It was designed and constructed by eminent New York architect Ernest J. Flagg, who also designed many of the other beautiful marble buildings on the Academy grounds. The chapel was completed in 1908. It was enlarged by architect Philip Crett in 1940 to accommodate the expanded brigade of midshipmen. So I'm standing here in the aisle of the Naval Academy Chapel. This chapel can seat the entire brigade of midshipmen, numbering about 4,000 students. Again, this chapel was built in 1908, and it is the main chapel. There's several other chapels on the yard. It's currently in the shape of a Latin cross, and you can see as we go further down the aisle some of the windows that we're going to take a closer look at.
Designed by Tiffany Studios and unveiled on February 21, 1908, the Porter window is a memorial to former Superintendent Admiral David Dixon Porter, the second Admiral in the U.S. Navy and Admiral Farragut's foster brother. It was a gift of the class of 1869 and features Christ the Consoler walking on the waters. Designed by Tiffany in 1908, the Sampson window's Angel of Peace honors Rear Admiral William T. Sampson. Below the balcony, a window features Peter and Andrew with Christ saying, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Designed by Tiffany in 1928, the Commission Invisible window depicts a newly minted ensign with his commissioning papers in hand and Christ over his shoulder pointing to the American flag, symbolizing both the earthly and divine commission.
The window I'm standing in front of here is the David G. Farragut window. This was designed by Frederick Wilson, who was employed by the Tiffany and Company Corporation, and it was designed actually before World War I in honor of Admiral David Glasgow Farragut, who won renown for his victory at the Battle of Mobile Bay during the Civil War. The window was actually finished in 1917, and it was unveiled in 1920 by Farragut's niece.
Also featured within the aisle and transepts of the chapel are various tablets, memorials to alumni killed in action during the 19th century. We will now make our way immediately below the main chapel to the hollowed crypt containing the remains of one of the American Navy's oldest officer heroes of the American Revolution.
Standing here beneath the Naval Academy Chapel in what is known as the crypt or the tomb of John Paul Jones, who was one of the most famous naval leaders of the American Revolution. Jones died in 1792 in Paris, France. His remains were discovered and they were transported back to the United States, where the Brigade of Midshipmen oversaw their internment here at the Naval Academy, first in 1906 in a temporary tomb, but then finally in 1913 they were encased in this beautiful marble sarcophagus here underneath the Naval Academy Chapel. So it's a very fitting resting place, final resting place, for one of America's greatest naval leaders of the American Revolution, John Paul Jones.
Now that we have explored the historical treasures in the chapel, let's head over to the Academy Archives, located in the Nimitz Library, to see what primary sources are available. Before going to an archives, it is a good idea to explore what online resources the repository has. So let's briefly go over what finding aids are and how they and archivists can help you conduct historical research. If I want to be a good researcher, before I even visit an archive, I want to fully explore what resources are available at the repository's website to make my appointment more efficient. One thing I do not want to do as a researcher is simply walk into the archives and ask the archivist for whatever they have on my topic. That will not please the archivist and will not give the perception that I am a professional researcher. Now, the first thing that I want to do as a good researcher is locate the repository's website. Most academic archives That is, archives in the libraries of universities and colleges have a gateway somewhere on the university library's website. In this case, I am at the Nimitz Library website, which is the library of the United States Naval Academy. I am going to click the widget here that says Archives. Archives at other academic universities and libraries may be entitled a Special Collections and Archives, or the Blank Memorial Archives. Now that I have arrived at the Archives web presence, a researcher like me that wants to find exactly what the Archives has in their collections before arriving to view it in their research room wants to find the finding aids. Finding aids are the main research guides that archivists make for researchers to use. Finding aids are necessary because of the way archival records are collected and stored. Archivists collect records in what is called the aggregate. This refers to a structure or material that is formed by a large collection of individual items, in this case a quantity of volume or a volume of records. Whereas in a library general collection, books are cataloged as individual items, which makes locating them simple. Archival records are produced and stored in groupings that depend on either the format or what the records document. They could be the records produced by an agency completing a specific project, or they could be copies of all letters and correspondence and reports created by some supervisor in an organization. Regardless, physical records are stored in physical formats such as volumes, folders, or boxes, and have to be preserved in their original order to reflect accurately and reliably the functions of the organizations that produce them. To protect the integrity of the records, archivists must preserve that order. But because records in their original order tend to be very voluminous and are not always in a definable arrangement scheme, archivists create finding aids, which are aids to help researchers find specific subjects and information relevant to their research in their archival collections. So, I'm going to click on the little widget here that says Archive Collections. Finding aids in a repository are typically arranged by some form of numbering scheme, which you see here. Not all archival collections have this function, but I am going to use the available search bar and search for the word chapel. The first result is the records of the Office of the Command Chaplain, so I will click on this link. This is a finding aid. Finding aids vary in size and format, but in general follow a very basic scheme. Finding aids are intended to deliver certain information about an archival collection. Most include a summary sheet that states basic information about the collection, such as title, inclusive dates, collection size, number of volumes or boxes in the collection, and an abstract description of what the collection is. The next element here, which is included in most archival finding aids, is an administrative or organizational history note that describes the history of the organization that created the records. Most archival finding aids also have a scope and contents or description of contents note, such as this. And this is where you find the more thorough primary description of the archival series than what is given in the abstract. All archival collections also have an arrangement statement. Arrangement statements are important. They identify how the various records in a collection are stored in relation to one another, and therefore arrangement statements make the collection usable by researchers. Sometimes records arrive at an archive in a completely unarranged condition, and archivists have to completely rearrange the records. Regardless of whether or not they do this, archivists must briefly, concisely, and clearly describe and arrange the records. Arrangement and description are the heart of archival finding aids. Another important element in archival finding aids are access and use statements, particularly for records produced in the 20th and 21st centuries that contain private or personal information that archivists must either withhold or redact in order to protect individual privacy. And archivists typically relate those restrictions in this note. Most finding aids also contain acquisition and appraisal notes that document how the records came to the archives. Most archival finding aids also contain related materials notes that document where related archival or manuscript collections exist, either cataloged separately in the repository or stored in other archives, or where alternate formats may be found, such as microfilmed or digitized versions of records. Processing information is also included that states who wrote the finding aid and at what time, and if any secondary sources were consulted. Some finding aids also contain subject headings. Name and subject and genre terms are used in archives typically that are linked to larger library database systems. These are called Library of Congress subject headings and are included in finding aids so that a researcher that simply types their key search words into a general database or library general collection search bar will locate relevant archival materials. The final important element in most finding aids is the contents list. In this particular archival series, one of the items I want to look at is the chaplain's register books. Here in the contents list, I will find a more detailed description note for the chaplain's registers than is found in the description of contents note. Located under this description is the contents list, otherwise known as a volume, folder, or box list. These lists let researchers know what records exist in each particular volume, folder, or box list, what time period they cover, and sometimes a brief description of what is in them. Well, now that I know what records I want to view by searching through the repository's finding aids, now it is time to make an appointment to view them in the archive's reading room. Even if an archive does not require appointments, it is the polite way to conduct research and gives archivists time to prepare for your visit.
Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm here to look at some records. I've never been here before.
All right, well, to get you started, we do ask that everyone fills out a registration form. By signing and filling out that, it says you have read over these rules for the use of materials. Highlights are pretty standard for an archive: no food or drink, no pens, no flash photography. We do ask that you stow all your bags, coats, outerwear in the closet. So once you fill that out, we'll be good to get started with your request.
Thank you.
All archives have registration forms that ask for personal information, and all archives have rules and regulations for the use of materials.
All right, so I looked over your online finding aids, and I want to see entry 151, which is the records of the command chaplain, volume 3, or chaplain register number 3, and box number 5 of the chaplain's office files. And I'd also like to see the reference file for the chapel, the dedicatory chapel dedication reference file. Awesome.
Sir, here are the materials you requested. One other rule we did not mention is that when you do use the materials, use only one folder at a time. Keep the material flat on the table and in the same order.
Okay.
And if I can get one more signature from you, I get your name and signature. That's just the request form to pull the materials off the shelf.
Thank you.
The best part of research is actually viewing the records, with proper care, of course. Here we see a record of divine services officiated by the Academy chaplain in the 1890s. Also included are newspaper clippings for the dedication of the Naval Academy Chapel, along with dedicatory programs for the chapel's many Tiffany windows.